Hey guys, ViscosComb24 here, bringing you a real quick redstone video. Today I'm going to be showing you all how to build this. It is my new, improved 4x4 redstone block only circle door. So as you can see, it all closes. When I flick the lever again, you can see it will also all open. It's got a somewhat spiraled animation because of how it's wired. Not perfectly spiral, but none of the 4x4 redstone block only circle doors I've made have had a perfect spiral. It's just a little bit more obvious because of this, and we'll get into that a little bit later. This thing is 14 blocks wide, 16 blocks long or deep, and then 1 block tall. So it has a volume of 224 blocks. This design is 42 blocks smaller than the previous 4x4 circle door that I gave you guys a tutorial for. That was quite a while ago now. And that one was 14 by 19, and I'll put a real quick comparison on screen now to show you the difference in size. Not long after making the 14 by 19 design, I had actually created a 14 by 18 design, but I never made a tutorial for it because I thought it was pretty boring, and I was also right in the middle of my burnout, so obviously I wasn't going to find any motivation to make a tutorial then. But they'll all be on screen now in a lineup just so you can see the difference in size between them all. It was a pretty gradual progression, and it's all culminated in this thing right here. This has got some pretty interesting mechanics. I hesitate to say that it's maxed, because when I first made the 14 by 19 design, I thought that that was the max, and then when I made the 14 by 18 design, I was like, well, this is definitely the max now, and of course, it wasn't, because here we are with a smaller design. So, I clearly have no idea what the true limits are for this door, but I will say that I'll probably be stopping at this size for the next little while. I'm pretty happy with how this has turned out, and yeah, just generally don't feel like there's a need for me to try and make it any smaller. Maybe if I get bored, I'll pull it out as a good old reliable, another project to work on whenever I'm burned out. But yeah, I tried to create a smaller Java edition design to go with this one, just to, sort of try and keep up some similarities across tutorials. In the original tutorial, I had a Java edition design that I presented alongside the Bedrock design, but try as I might, I couldn't get a smaller Java edition design working. Of course, my Bedrock edition brain is just not really wired that way, but regardless, I decided to stop holding off on the video just so I could try again and again and again on a door that just wasn't going to happen, at least not yet, and decided to just go through and give you guys a tutorial for this. So this is going to be a much shorter video as a result of that, but I hope that you enjoy it either way, because there are a handful of really interesting mechanics that I used in here to get it functioning. So yeah, without further ado, let's get into the tutorial. Because this is a redstone block only door, the materials list isn't very diverse, seeing as you can only use redstone blocks, so here is everything that you will need for this door. 49 sticky pistons, 18 regular pistons, 29 building blocks. These actually, it doesn't really matter at all what kind of block this is, just so long as your input block is a solid block. 38 blocks of redstone, and then a input, toggle input. This can be a lever, but it could also technically just be a T flip-flop that's been hooked up to a button. So, let's get everything out and begin. Like with the previous design, you're going to want to first determine where you want the hallway of your door to be. It's much easier to get started on the wiring. Now, this door, like all redstone block only doors on Bedrock Edition, can be built in any orientation and in any direction you want. I just like to go with the trapdoor design because it gives me a nice blank background. Grass is pretty nice, solid color, and also my brain just sort of likes it this way. So if you are wanting to build this as a door, just keep in mind you'll have to rotate everything 90 degrees in order to get it facing upwards. So that little bit of explanation out of the way, let's get into building in the layout. First things first, put down 2 temporary blocks, break that one out, then put in 3 sticky pistons, break out the temporary block, and put in a 4th. You're going to get used to my saying that because we have to do it another 3 times. So 2 temporary blocks, break it out, 3 pistons, break, and then a 4th. 2 temporary blocks, break that, 3 sticky pistons, break that out, and then a fourth. And final time, 2 temporary blocks, break it, 3 sticky pistons, break, and then a fourth. This right here is the base layout for the 4x4 circle. Now let's get in the very, very crucial pistons for the double piston extender. There we go. So you want them to be sort of facing in right towards this corner, and then put a block of redstone there. So sticky piston next to the end of the double, temporary block, sticky piston, and then a block of redstone. Gonna want to do this for all 4 corners. And there we are. Now we can finally put in the input. The input just has to be next to one of these sticky pistons where it's got this little like V shape, right? And that can be any of them. So it could be here, or here, or here. But I like to go with here because my brain works that way. It's no other explanation, really. So flick it to on. This will put your door in the open state. Sticky piston, block of redstone, sticky piston, block of redstone, sticky, block, and then a regular piston, which technically can also be a sticky piston. I'm just going to be going with a regular piston because I like it that way. No other reason. Block of redstone, block of redstone, block, sticky piston, block of redstone, and then another regular piston that can technically be a sticky piston. So basically what we've got right here is literally just the input line. What this handles is just getting power over to more important stuff, and also this right here, when you flick it off, will power that piston, which is obviously needed. So yeah, sort of gives you an idea of how that all works. Now that we've got in this input line, we can start getting on to wiring the double. So the double piston extender uses a pretty much what I think is a rather standard setup, but with really weird inputs in order to fit in the size. Essentially, I'm reusing this redstone block to not only power this piston, but to also power the double piston extender right here, as you can see. And then, once it's gotten its pulse, we use this sticky piston to pull it out of the way. Then we can retract that, and you can see this redstone block gets reused again to power the final retraction, and then you power this again to get the redstone block moved out of the way. And the way that I handle that logic is obviously, first thing, you have this pull down there, but what we need is for this to be able to then retract it once it's been pushed back into this position. So I have used a very, very similar setup to the setup I used in the 14x19 design. The only difference is, instead of using a monostable or pulse input, I'm now just using these 2 pistons, so that when this changes state, we get that pushing, and reason for that I'll explain a little bit later. Just put that back, there we go, okay. Yeah, go over here, sticky piston, and then a redstone block. This is so that we can get the piston here, just like for there, powered, and then it will also be used to power this sticky piston, which will give our double power, as well as that single piston there. Now, here is where the magic happens, and I'm going to just let it run. There we go. So you can see how I got in all the logic here. It might not be as obvious, so I'll try my best to break it down. I'm not really good at explaining this sort of thing. What's happening is, on the rising edge, this piston right here, this sticky piston, is retracting, deactivating that piston. That redstone block moves here and activates that one, pushing it to here. So everything's active, right? The signal will go through, and then we get power to our double piston extender right here, right? Okay? And I'm actually going to really quickly reset everything and just sort of manually show you everything as it goes. So the first thing that will happen is this depowers, pushing or pulling the redstone block back, activating this, pushing the block in, so that then this double piston extender can push it into the middle. This right here, upon deactivating, will deactivate this piston and then reactivate this one, so that we have an immovable block preventing the slider from activating. And you'll notice here the slider has this redstone block right here, which, if moved, will deactivate this piston. The reason that we have these immovable blocks is so that once we get the activation circuit going, you'll notice this piston is powered but not pushing, so the redstone block stays in place, leaving this powered, ready to pull the redstone block out of the way when it gets here. And we'll just sort of simulate that, right? It pulls it back once the redstone block has been pushed back into place, and then this, by having this thing push over, I'm going to really quickly do set this to the absolute maximum. Oh wow, it doesn't slow down at all. A little bit of slowdown. So you can see that pushes over. This gets power. This deactivates that. That piston pulls back, allowing this to push, deactivating that and pulling the redstone block out of the way. Then we depower this, depowering this piston, allowing that piston to push back, putting the redstone block back in place, pushing the redstone block out of the way to get the final retraction in. That's probably confusing as hell, but I really don't know any other way to explain it. So I will now just give you an actual like full-on slow-mo. I'll like slow it down in editing and everything. And hopefully that helps you with following what I was getting at. So, big ass explanation for this little piece of the door, but you can see right here all of this is used to handle that double piston extender as well as some extra sticky pistons. Now we can get on to moving this stuff along throughout the door, getting the signal throughout the rest of the door. So, sticky piston, redstone block, sticky piston, redstone block, sticky piston, redstone block, sticky block, sticky block. This right here is another input line, and it's getting the power from here over to the other side of the door so that we can then put another input line down, bring it all the way over here, and then bring it over there. You get the idea by this point. But before all that, of course, we want to wire this double piston extender. So, something you might sort of recognize from over there. Sticky piston with a redstone block powering this, which is also here and also there. Sticky piston with a redstone block to power our double. And now for the fun and quirky stuff, alright? We're going to get in another very similar slider, except instead of having two normal pistons like this to create that constant immovable, we're going to have a piston here and then a piston here. And of course, because this is the slider, we will now have our slider to move it back, sort of like a regular bog standard ass slider, right? To push it back there, you see? And I'm also going to do true. There we go. Okay. So, in the same way that over here I am in need of having a immovable block on the closing edge, we need that over here as well. There's a slight difference, of course, being that there is not always an immovable block, but that's purely because I opted for, instead of having this set up here, where it's two pistons alternating the role of immovable, we have one piston being immovable when need be, and then another piston just to push it back, using a regular ass slider technique. So the effect of that, you can see here. And it's just, the effect, in quotation, is literally just the exact same thing that we wanted over here, right? Except it's just done a little bit differently. I've tried finding ways of cutting this down in order to make it 14 by 14. What a dream that would be. But I haven't been able to get that done quite yet. So this was my best solution to come up with to fit in a 14 by 16. And I don't think it's all too bad. It gets the job done, and it's also replicable over here for this one, just with a few tweaks that we'll get onto when we get there. Now for the lovely task of getting the input line moved all the way over here. So hold on, let me say that in words. So sticky block, regular piston that can be a sticky, block, redstone block, block, redstone block, block, sticky piston, block, and redstone block, and then another piston that can technically be sticky, but I'm not making it sticky because that's just how my brain be working right now. Gonna have a very similar setup to over here, so we're gonna start off by putting the redstone block down, power that one, and if you don't recognize it at this point, then I'm gonna be real. I'm not gonna go back and try and show you. It's all over the place in this door. Sticky piston, and then a block, redstone block to power our double. We're going to get in a very, very similar slider setup to over there. The two normal pistons lined up. It's actually important that this be a normal piston. It's fine for this to be sticky, but this one right here has to be normal, and this one also. I can't say for certain if it's like a 100% has to be type deal, but it guarantees 100% reliability for that to be a normal piston, because if it were sticky, it would pull this piston back, and it could potentially activate before this piston realized it would power, because, of course, Bedrock Edition is a little bit wacky, doesn't have its own set update order, and while that is kind of awesome because it allows for sliders to push back without any updates, it also means that you have to be kind of careful. You kind of have to make sure that you don't have anything that could break because these pistons are unreliably figuring out that they're powered. So it's a bit of a trade-off that we got going here. And it's important. Felt that it was good to mention, so make sure that this is normal just so you can guarantee your door's working. Redstone block. Block. And then, of course, a regular piston right there. Very similar setup to the other side for the same reason. Now we're going to go over here. Block, sticky piston, redstone block, piston. And this can be a sticky piston too. Block, redstone block, 3 blocks, and then a piston that can also be a sticky piston. Alright, that is our final input line. So we've got the input stretched all the way around the door, and of course this final little bit here relies on the very beginning, actually, to power this piston in order for it to slide back. So, now that we've got the input line done, we can get on to wiring up the final double. First things first, we're going to... The reason for this slider is because I needed to get power to this right here. The only way that I could do that was either through a piston right here, which, as you can see, not really accessible without getting in the way of the slider that has to go here. And so basically my only option is to put a sticky piston there, and I needed more delay, so I added another piston into the mix just to give it that one extra tick of delay that it needs on the opening edge. So this little stretch of 3 pistons right here is all activated by the slider, which is why the slider is there, because I couldn't access it any other way. Piston, block, redstone block, block, and now we're going to have a very, very similar setup to slider on the other side. And believe it or not, that is actually the full door done, assuming I have not forgotten anything. And yeah, that is the door. So I hope you all enjoyed. I hope that this was like at least somewhat intelligible. I tried my best to explain it in the best way that I knew how. But yeah, this little slider setup right here is the heart and soul of the double piston extender. And this piston right here does this redstone block alone does so much work, does so much heavy lifting. It's just, this slider is what allows it to do said heavy lifting. And yeah. That's all for this video. I'm Viscoscomb24, and I'll see you next time.